Welcome to TCDI Talks, where we highlight the people and ideas driving innovation in legal services and technology. I'm your host, Michael Gibeault, and today we're talking about a question that comes up in nearly every GenAI conversation: what happens to the data? Legal teams are under pressure to move quickly and take advantage of new technology, but they're still required to protect sensitive information and preserve privilege, all while managing cost and defensibility. Joining me to discuss how using AI behind the firewall can help is my colleague, Dave York, TCDI's Chief Client Officer. Dave is a co-leader of our tech lab and oversees our litigation services team. He brings valuable experience from the law firm, corporate, and service provider sides of the industry. Dave, thanks for joining us.
Great to talk with you, Michael.
So Dave, let's start with one of the central ideas from your article that you just wrote. You write that GenAI has changed the conversation, but it hasn't changed the obligations. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, certainly. GenAI creates new opportunities for us to move faster, to gain better information. But legal teams and everybody that's working with this data, we still have obligations to manage risk, security, confidentiality, defensibility, and certainly ensure that we have client confidence and counsel confidence throughout the entire process. So, a few years ago, it seemed like the question was, can we use GenAI? But instead, we have to assume the answer to that is yes, and switch the question to how do we protect the data, preserve privilege, control access and costs associated with it, and keep the workflows defensible, just like we would any other workflow. Certainly, the technology has changed, but our responsibilities have not.
So Dave, when corporate legal teams evaluate GenAI for a matter, what questions should they be asking beyond whether the technology can perform the task?
Great question, Michael. So, certainly having an understanding of where's the data processed. Is the data retained or being used to train a larger model when we're talking about GenAI? Just like going all the way back to how data has been managed and hosted, over the years, can access be restricted? Can it be audited? Are there appropriate access controls around it? Are the outputs logged? And certainly with any solution, you want to make sure, whether or not a process can be repeated and explained later on down the road. Asking these questions are certainly not obstacles to innovating and using emerging technology. They're just guardrails to help make the emerging technology and GenAI more usable.
So Dave, why does the location where legal data is processed matter so much when teams are working with GenAI?
I think you have to look at the data itself. I mean, the client data can include privileged communications, trade secrets, employee information, financial data and records, regulatory material, source code, investigations, highly sensitive data and information. Once that leaves a controlled environment or an environment the client is used to kind of maintaining and accessing that data, certainly the risk analysis with it changes. Keeping the data within a secured, monitored environment provides, a strong starting point for controlling that access, applying operational procedures, and maintaining quality practices. Certainly, it changes the conversation from trusting a tool to just validating a controlled process in the environment itself. So not just focusing in on the data, but the processes and the environments for which the data live in and are managed.
So Dave, what does behind the firewall actually mean in practice? And how is that different from using a typical cloud-based GenAI platform?
For different clients, it can mean different things. For some clients, that can mean behind their firewall. At TCDI, with our own data centers and our own hardware, we're typically talking about behind the TCDI firewall. And, we work in a variety of environments, cloud-based, behind the firewall. And so for us, bringing GenAI behind the firewall really means bringing that technology into a secured, controlled environment that a lot of our clients are already used to and are familiar with when it comes to how their data is managed. And certainly that's the same similar infrastructure that has the established access controls, operating procedures, and quality procedures that are tied to it. A lot of times when there's emerging technology or innovation, there's this idea that the data needs to go to the technology, and instead, we believe that you got to have the flexibility not just to default to that every time. Sometimes you got to bring the innovation and emerging technology to the data where it lives. And so for a lot of that clients, that means behind the TCDI firewall.
How does keeping data within a controlled environment affect privilege, confidentiality, access controls, and of course, the ability to audit to workflow?
Obviously, the less you move data around, it reduces the need to move highly sensitive information outside of an environment. If you're able to do more where the data lives or where it is consistently maintained, then that can lead to easier and better management of the data. And again, it goes back to, applying some of those same access controls that the clients have been used to over the years. Prompts, workflows, permissions, outputs, review protocols, other documentation can be managed within that controlled process. This, at the end of the day, just helps to create more transparent, repeatable, and explainable processes for an environment that is familiar to a lot of our clients.
Well, Dave, we always look at defensibility. So what kinds of validation, documentation, even human oversight should be built into the process?
Yeah, trust but verify on everything. Outputs, no matter what the solution, GenAI or otherwise, should always be validated rather than accepted every time. So many of us are used to dealing with that, and it's not a new concept in the industry, but certainly with the speed and the level of work product that you get out of GenAI tools, it does tend to have folks letting their guard down a little bit when it comes to the validation side. It can be very convincing of the outputs that you get, but being able to have that human in the loop validation, build it in workflows and documentation, so that your processes, are not just defensible and repeatable, but they can be explained as well. So you have those protocols and quality checks in play that can be explained and understood, not just today when you're doing it, but 6 months, a year, 2 years down the road, when you might have to go back to and explain what it is that you did. The process should definitely be structured around a logical validation workflow, and making sure that whether it's using other solutions to assist with that validation, but also ensuring that you have humans in the loop for that validation process. So, we live by the trust but validate, and certainly Gen AI and all solutions fall under that umbrella.
So, Dave, for a legal team that wants to move beyond experimentation, where is the most practical place to begin?
Yeah, I think clearly defining the use case or problem that you're trying to solve. There are a lot of different use cases when it comes to Gen AI, a lot of different applications and solutions that are out there. Understanding what the problems are that you're looking to solve, and understanding the use cases that you're focusing in on is going to help you align with the right solution and the right technology. And once you have a handle of what it is you're trying to solve for, making sure that you're taking the other holistic approach and values into consideration. So that's the security side of it. Understanding, everything about where the data is going, how it's being used, understanding how it fits into a process, and making sure that you're not just fixing one piece of the process, but you're not creating more work or breaking things before or after that piece that you fixed. And then also how the humans and teams are going to interact with it. So, it really starts with the problem that you're trying to solve. But then when you get into the actual implementation of those tools, jumping back to the data, the process, the tools, and the people to ensure you're solving them the right way.
Well, Dave, thank you so much for sharing your insights today.
Thank you, Michael.
Absolutely. It's clear that GenAI can create meaningful opportunities for legal teams. And as Dave explained, behind the firewall technology gives organizations another option when sensitive data or higher risk workflow calls for greater control. The goal isn't to choose one model for every situation. It's to use the right technology within a process that can be secured and validated. If you'd like to read Dave's article or keep up with what's next at TCDI, visit tcdi.com or connect with us on LinkedIn. Thank you again for joining us, and we'll see you next time on TCDI Talks.